Foreign and Military Intelligence. Final report of the Select Committee to study governmental operations with respect to intelligence activities. United States Senate, together with additional supplemental and separate views. April 26th, Legislative Day. April 14th, 1976. U.S. Government Printing Office, Washington, 1976. 94th Congress, Second Session. Report number 94-755. That is page 1. Moving on to page 2. Senate Select Committee to study governmental operations with respect to intelligence activities. Frank Church, Idaho Chairman. John G. Tower, Texas Vice Chairman. Philip A. Hart, Michigan. Howard H. Baker, Jr., Tennessee. Walter F. Mondale, Minnesota. Barry Goldwater, Arizona. Walter D. Huddleston, Kentucky. Charles McMathias, Jr., Maryland. Robert Morgan, North Carolina. Richard S. Schweiker, Pennsylvania. Gary Hart, Colorado. William G. Miller, Staff Director. Frederick A. O. Schwartz, Jr. Chief Counsel, Curtis R. Smothers. Counsel to the Minority, Audrey Hatry, Clerk of the Committee. That is the end of page 2, beginning of page 3. Letter of Transmittal by Senator Frank Church, Chairman of the Senate Select Committee to study governmental operations with respect to intelligence activities. On January 27, 1975, the Senate established a Select Committee to conduct an investigation and study of the intelligence activities of the United States. After 15 months of intensive work, I am pleased to submit to the Senate this volume of the final report of the committee relating to foreign and military intelligence. The inquiry arises out of allegations of abuse and improper activities by the intelligence agencies of the United States, and great public concern that the Congress take action to bring the intelligence agencies under the constitutional framework. The members of the Select Committee have worked diligently and in remarkable harmony. I want to express my gratitude to the Vice Chairman, Senator John Tower of Texas, for his cooperation throughout and the able assistance he has given me in directing this most difficult task. While every member of the committee has made important contributions, I especially want to thank Senator Walter D. Huddleston of Kentucky for the work he has done as chairman of the Foreign and Military Subcommittee. His direction of the subcommittee, working with Senator Charles McMathias of Maryland, Senator Gary Hart of Colorado, and Senator Barry Goldwater of Arizona, has been of immeasurable help to me in bringing this enormous undertaking to a useful and responsible conclusion. Finally, I wish to thank the staff for the great service they have performed for the committee and for the Senate in assisting the members of the committee to carry out the mandate levied by Senate Resolution 21. The quality, integrity, and devotion of the staff has contributed in a significant way to the important analyses, findings, and recommendations of the committee. The volume which follows, the report on the foreign and military intelligence activities of the United States, is intended to provide the Senate the basic information about the intelligence agencies of the United States required to make the necessary judgments concerning the role such agencies should play in the future. Despite security considerations which have limited what can responsibly be printed for public release, the information which is presented in this report is a reasonably complete picture of the intelligence activities undertaken by the United States and the problems that such activities pose for constitutional government. The findings and recommendations contained at the end of this volume constitute an agenda for which, if adopted, would go a long way toward preventing the abuses that have occurred in the past from occurring again, and would assure that the intelligence activities of the United States will be conducted in accordance with constitutional processes. Frank Church. End of page 3, beginning of page 4. Note: the committee's final report has been reviewed and declassified by the appropriate executive agencies. These agencies submitted comments to the committee on security and factual aspects of each chapter. On the basis of these comments, the committee and staff conferred with representatives of the agencies to determine which parts of the report should remain classified to protect sensitive intelligence sources and methods. At the request of the agencies, the committee deleted 3 chapters from this report, quote, cover and quote, espionage and quote, and quote, budgetary oversight and quote. In addition, 2 sections of the chapter, quote, covert action of the CIA and quote, and 1 section of the chapter, quote, Department of State and quote, have been deleted at the request of the agencies. Particular passages which were changed at the request of the agencies are denoted by italics and a footnote. Complete versions of the deleted or abridged materials are available to members of the Senate in the committee's classified report under the provisions of S-Res 21 and the standing rules of the Senate. Names of individuals were deleted when, in the committee's judgment, disclosure of their identities would either endanger their safety or constitute a substantial invasion of privacy. Consequently, footnote citations to testimony and documents occasionally contain only descriptions of an individual's position. Appendix 3, quote, Soviet intelligence collection and intelligence against the United States, end quote, is derived solely from a classified CIA report on the same subject, which was edited for security considerations by the Select Committee staff. End of page 4, beginning of page 5. These are a table of contents, different chapters and page numbers. I will not be reading these individually. End of page 5, beginning of page 6. Same thing, more chapters and page numbers and sections. End of page 6, beginning of page 7. Much of the same. End of page 7, beginning of page 8. Much of the same. End of page 8, beginning of page 9. 1. Introduction. The Senate Select Committee on Intelligence Activities has conducted a 15-month-long inquiry, the first major inquiry into intelligence since World War II. The inquiry arose out of allegations of substantial, even massive wrongdoing within the, quote, national intelligence, end quote, system. Footnote 1. I'm going to pause there and read footnote 1. National intelligence includes, but is not limited to, the CIA, NSA, DIA, elements within the Department of Defense for collection of intelligence through reconnaissance programs, the Intelligence Division of the FBI, and the intelligence elements of the State Department and the Treasury Department. I will resume the reading. This final report provides a history of the evolution of intelligence an evaluation of the intelligence system of the United States, a critique of its problems, recommendations for legislative action, and recommendations to the executive branch. The committee believes that its recommendations will provide a sound framework for conducting the vital intelligence activities of the United States in a manner which meets the nation's intelligence requirements and protects the liberties of American citizens and the freedoms which our Constitution guarantees. The shortcomings of the intelligence system, the adverse effects of secrecy, and the failure of congressional oversight to assure adequate accountability for executive branch decisions concerning intelligence activities were major subjects of the committee's inquiry. Equally important to the obligation to investigate allegations of abuse was the obligation to investigate allegations of abuse was the duty to review systematically the intelligence community's overall activities since 1945 and to evaluate its present structure and performance. An extensive national intelligence system has been a vital part of the United States government since 1941. Intelligence information has had an important influence on the direction and development of American foreign policy and has been essential to the maintenance of our national security. The committee is convinced that the United States requires an intelligence system which will provide policymakers with accurate intelligence and analysis. We must have an early warning system to monitor potential military threats by countries hostile to United States interests. We need a strong intelligence system to verify that treaties concerning arms limitations are being honored. Information derived from the intelligence agencies is a necessary ingredient in making national defense and foreign policy decisions. Such information is also necessary in countering the efforts of hostile intelligence services and in halting terrorists, international drug traffickers, and other international criminal activities. Within this country, certain carefully controlled intelligence activities are essential for effective law enforcement. The United States has devoted enormous resources to the creation of a national intelligence system, and today there is an awareness on the part of many citizens that a national intelligence system is a end of page 9, beginning of page 10, permanent and necessary component of our government. The system's value to the country has been proven and it will be needed for the foreseeable future. But a major conclusion of this inquiry is that congressional oversight is necessary to assure that in the future our intelligence community functions effectively within the framework of the Constitution. The committee is of the view that many of the unlawful actions taken by officials of the intelligence agencies were rationalized as their public duty. It was necessary for the committee to understand how the pursuit of the public good could have the opposite effect. As Justice Brandeis observed, experience should teach us to be most on our guard to protect liberty when the government's purposes are beneficent. Men born to freedom are naturally alert to repel invasion of their liberty by evil-minded rulers. The greatest dangers to liberty lurk in insidious encroachment by men of zeal, well-meaning but without understanding. Footnote 2. I will pause there and read footnote 2. Olmstead versus United States, 277 U.S. 438 479, 1928. Resuming the reading. A. The mandate of the committee's inquiry. On January 27, 1975, Senate Resolution 21 established a select committee, quote, to conduct an investigation and study of governmental operations with respect to intelligence activities and of the extent, if any, to which illegal, improper, or unethical activities were engaged in by any agency of the federal government, end quote. Senate Resolution 21 lists specific areas of inquiry and study. 1. Whether the Central Intelligence Agency has conducted an illegal domestic intelligence operation in the United States. 2. The conduct of domestic intelligence or counterintelligence operations against United States citizens by the Federal Bureau of Investigation or any other federal agency. 3. The origin and disposition of the so-called Huston Plan to apply United States Intelligence Agency capabilities against individuals or organizations within the United States. 4. The extent to which the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the Central Intelligence Agency, and other law enforcement or intelligence agencies coordinate their respective activities, any agreements which govern that coordination, and the extent to which a lack of coordination has contributed to activities or actions which are illegal, improper, inefficient, unethical, or contrary to the intent of Congress. 5. The extent to which the operation of domestic intelligence or counterintelligence activities and the operation of any other activities within the United States by the Central Intelligence Agency conforms to the legislative charter of that agency and the intent of the Congress. 6. The past and present interpretation by the Director of Central Intelligence, of the responsibility to protect intelligence sources and methods as it relates to that provision of the National Security Act of 1947, which provides, quote, end of page 10, beginning of page 11, that the agency shall have no police, subpoena, law enforcement powers, or internal security functions, end quote. Footnote 3. Pause the reading to read footnote 3. 50. USC 403D 3. Appendix B, Senate Select Committee Hearings. Hereinafter cited as hearings. Volume 7, page 210. Resuming the reading. 7. The nature and extent of executive branch oversight of all United States intelligence activities. 8. The need for specific legislative authority to govern the operations of any intelligence agencies of the federal government now existing without that explicit statutory authority, including but not limited to agencies such as the Defense Intelligence Agency and the National Security Agency. 9. The nature and extent to which federal agencies cooperate and exchange intelligence information, and the adequacy of any regulations or statutes to which governs such cooperation and exchange of intelligence information. 10. The extent to which United States intelligence agencies are governed by executive orders, rules, or regulations, either published or secret, and the extent to which those executive orders, rules, or regulations interpret, expand, or are in conflict with specific legislative authority. 11. The violation or suspected violation of any state or federal statute by any intelligence agency or by any person or by or on behalf of any intelligence agency of the federal government, including but not limited to surreptitious entries, surveillance, wiretaps, or eavesdropping, illegal opening of the United States mail, or the monitoring of United States mail. 12. The need for improved, strengthened, or consolidated oversight of United States intelligence activities by Congress. 13. Whether any of the existing laws of the United States are inadequate either in their provisions or manner of enforcement to safeguard the rights of American citizens, to improve executive and legislative control of intelligence and related activities, and to resolve uncertainties as to the authority of the United States intelligence and related agencies. 14. Whether there is unnecessary duplication of expenditure and effort in the collection and processing of intelligence information by the United States agencies. 15. The extent and necessity of overt and covert intelligence activities in the United States and abroad. In addressing these mandated areas of inquiry, the committee has focused on three broad questions. 1. Whether intelligence activities have functioned in accordance with the Constitution and the laws of the United States. 2. Whether the structure, programs, past history, and present policies of the American intelligence system have served the national interests in a manner consistent with declared national policies and purposes. End of page 11, beginning of page 12. And 3. Whether the processes through which the intelligence agencies have been directed and controlled have been adequate to assure conformity with policy and the law. Over the past year, the committee and its staff have carefully examined the intelligence and structure of the United States. Considerable time and effort have been devoted in order to understand what has been done by the United States government in secrecy during the 30-year period since the end of World War II. It is clear to the committee that there are many necessary and proper governmental activities that must be conducted in secrecy. Some of these activities affect the security and the very existence of the nation. It is also clear from the committee's inquiry that intelligence activities conducted outside the framework of the Constitution and statutes can undermine the treasured values guaranteed in the Bill of Rights. Furthermore, if the intelligence agencies act in ways inimical to declared national purposes, they damage the reputation, power, and influence of the United States abroad. The committee's investigation has documented that a number of actions committed in the name of, quote, national security, end quote, were inconsistent with declared policy and the law. Hearings have been held, and the committee has issued reports on alleged assassination plots, covert action in Chile, and the interception of domestic communications by the National Security Agency, NSA. Regrettably, some of these abuses cannot be regarded as aberrations. Section B. The purpose of the committee's findings and recommendations. It is clear that a primary task for any successor oversight committee and Congress as a whole will be to frame basic statutes necessary under the Constitution within which the intelligence agencies of the United States can function efficiently under clear guidelines. Charters delineating the missions, authorities, and limitations for some of the United States' most important intelligence agencies do not exist. For example, there is no statutory authority for the NSA's intelligence activities. Where statutes do exist, as within the CIA, they are vague and have failed to provide the necessary guidelines defining missions and limitations. The committee's investigation has demonstrated, moreover, that the lack of legislation has had the effect of limiting public debate upon some important national issues. The CIA's broad statutory charter, the 1947 National Security Act, makes no specific mention of covert action. The CIA's former general counsel, Lawrence Houston, who was deeply involved in drafting the 1947 Act, wrote in September 1947, quote, "We do not believe that there was any thought in the minds of Congress that the CIA, under the authority of the National Security Agency, would take positive action for subversion and sabotage," end quote. Footnote 4. Reading footnote 4. Memorandum from CIA General Counsel Lawrence Houston to DCI Helene Coder, September 25th, 47. Resuming reading. Yet, a few months after enactment of the 1947 legislation, the National Security Council authorized the CIA to engage in covert action programs. The provision of the Act, cited as authorizing CIA covert activities, provides for the agency. End of page 12, beginning of page 13. To perform such other functions and duties related to intelligence affecting the national security, as the National Security Council may from time to time direct. Footnote 4a. Footnote 4a. 50 U.S.C. 403 D5. Resuming reading. Secret executive orders issued by the NSC to carry out covert action programs were not subject to congressional review. Indeed, until recent years, except for a few members, Congress was not fully aware of the existence of the so-called, quote, secret charter for intelligence activities, end quote. Those members who did know had no institutional means for discussing their knowledge of secret intelligence activities with their colleagues. The problem of how the Congress can effectively use secret knowledge in its legislative processes remains to be resolved. It is the committee's view that a strong and effective oversight committee is an essential first step that must be taken to resolve this fundamental issue. C. The focus and scope of the committee's inquiry and obstacles encountered. The inquiry mandated in S-Res 21 falls into two main categories. The first concerns allegations of wrongdoing. The nature of the committee's inquiry into these matters tend quite properly to be akin to the investigations conducted by Senate and congressional committees in the past. We decided from the outset, however, that this committee is neither a court nor a law enforcement agency, and that while using many traditional congressional investigative techniques, our inquiry has served primarily to illustrate the problems before Congress and the country. The Justice Department and the courts have in turn have their proper roles to play. The second category of inquiry has been an examination of the intelligence agencies themselves. The committee wished to learn enough of. This is Matthew John Ramos. Bandicam had a malfunction, so I will be using an AI text reader to read the rest of this document for this episode.
about their past and present activities to make the legislative judgments required to assure the American people that whatever necessary secret intelligence activities were being undertaken were subject to constitutional processes and were being conducted in as effective, humane, and efficient a manner as possible. The committee focused on many issues affecting the intelligence agencies which had not been seriously addressed since our peacetime intelligence system was created in 1947. The most important questions relating to intelligence, such as its value to national security purposes and its cost and quality, have been carefully examined over the past year. Although some of the committee's findings can be reported to the public only in outline, enough can be set forth to justify the recommendations. The committee has necessarily been selective. A year was not enough time to investigate everything relevant to intelligence activities. These considerations guided the committee's choices. A limited number of programs and incidents were examined in depth rather than reviewing hundreds superficially. The committee's purpose was to understand the causes for the particular performance or behavior of an agency. The specific cases examined were chosen because they reflected generic problems. End of page 13. Beginning of page 14. Where broad programs were closely reviewed. For example, the CIA's covert action programs, the committee sought to examine successes as well as apparent failures. Programs were examined from Franklin Roosevelt's administration to the present. This was done in order to present the historical context within which intelligence activities have developed and to assure that sensitive, fundamental issues would not be subject to possible partisan biases. It is clear from the committee's inquiry that problems arising from the use of the national intelligence system at home and abroad are to be found in every administration. Accordingly, the committee chose to emphasize particular parts of the national intelligence system and to address particular cases in depth. The committee has concentrated its energies on the 6 executive branch groups that make up what is called national intelligence: the Central Intelligence Agency, the counterintelligence activities of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the National Security Agency, the national intelligence components of the Department of Defense other than NSA. 5. The National Security Council, the intelligence activities of the Department of State. The investigation of these national intelligence groupings included examining the degree of command and control exercised over them by the President and other key government officials or institutions. The committee also sought to evaluate the ability and effectiveness of Congress to assert its oversight right and responsibilities. The agencies the committee has concentrated on have great powers and extensive activities which must be. The United States intelligence system needs reform and change. The committee believes that many of its general recommendations can and should be applied to the intelligence operations of all other government agencies. Based on its investigation, the committee concludes that solutions to the main problems can be developed by analyzing the broad patterns emerging from the examination of particular cases. At the same time, neither the dangers, nor the causes of abuses within the intelligence system, nor their possible solutions can be fairly understood without evaluating the historical context in which intelligence operations have been conducted. Individual cases and programs of government surveillance which the committee examined raise questions concerning the inherent conflict between the government's perceived need to conduct surveillance and the citizens' constitutionally protected rights of privacy and dissent. It has become clear that if some lose their liberties unjustly, all may lose their liberties. The protections and obligations of law must apply to all. Only by looking at the broad scope of questionable activity over a long period can we realistically assess the potential dangers of intrusive government. For example, only through an understanding of the end of page 14. Beginning of page 15. Totality of government efforts against dissenters over the past 30 Years can one weigh the extent to which such an emphasis may chill legitimate free expression and assembly. The Select Committee has conducted the only thorough investigation ever made of United States intelligence and its post-World War II emergence as a complex, sophisticated system of multiple agencies and extensive activities. The committee staff of 100, including 60 professionals, has assisted the 11 members of the committee in this in-depth inquiry, which involved more than 800 interviews, over 250 executive hearings, and documentation in excess of 110,000 pages. The advice of former and current intelligence officials, cabinet members, State, Defense, and Justice Department experts, and citizens from the private sector who have served in national security areas has been sought throughout the committee's inquiry. The committee has made a conscious effort to seek the views of all principal officials who have served in the intelligence agencies since the end of World War II. We also solicited the opinions of constitutional experts and the wisdom of scientists knowledgeable about the technology used by intelligence agencies. It was essential to learn the views of these sources outside of the government to obtain as full and balanced an understanding of intelligence activities as possible. The fact that government intelligence agencies resist any examination of their secret activities even by another part of the same government should not be minimized. The intelligence agencies are a sector of American government set apart. Employees' loyalties to their organizations have been conditioned by the closed, compartmented and secretive circumstances of their agency's formation and operation. In some respects, the intelligence profession resembles monastic life with some of the disciplines and personal sacrifices reminiscent of medieval orders. Intelligence work is a life of service, but one in which the norms of American national life are sometimes distressingly distorted. Despite its legal Senate mandate, and the issuance of subpoenas, in no instance has the committee been able to examine the agency's files on its own. In all the agencies, whether CIA, FBI, NSA, INR, DIA, or the NSC, documents and evidence have been presented through the filter of the agency itself. Although the Senate inquiry was congressionally ordered and although properly constituted committees under the Constitution have the right of full inquiry, the Central Intelligence Agency and other agencies of the executive branch have limited the committee's access to the full record. Several reasons have been given for this limitation. In some instances, the so-called doctrine of executive privilege has been asserted. Despite these assertions of executive privilege, there are no classes of documents which the available in the executive branch. The exception, of course, involves the Nixon files, which were not made available because of court order. It should be noted that in some highly important areas of its end of page 15, beginning of page 16, investigation made between the intelligence agencies and their informers and sources, including other intelligence agencies and governments. The committee has agreed that in general, the name committee has been refused access to files or documents. These involve, among others, the arrangements and agreements. The committee made between the intelligence agencies and their informers and sources, including other intelligence agencies and governments. The committee has agreed that in general, the names of agents, and their methods of conducting certain intelligence activities should remain in the custody of a few within the executive branch. But there is a danger and an uncertainty which arises from accepting at face value the assertions of the agencies and departments which in the past have abused or exceeded their authority. If the occasion demands, a duly authorized congressional committee must have the right to go behind agency assertions and review the full evidence on which agency responses to committee inquiries have been based. Significant new facets of the post-war system are the great size, technological capacity, and bureaucratic momentum of the intelligence apparatus, and, more importantly, the public's acceptance of the necessity for a substantial permanent intelligence system. This capability contrasts with the previous sporadic, ad hoc efforts which generally occurred during wars and national emergencies. The extent and magnitude of secret intelligence activities is alien to the previous American experience. Three other developments since World War II have contributed to the power, influence, and importance of the intelligence agencies. First, the executive branch generally and the president in particular have become paramount within the federal system, primarily through the retention of powers accrued during the emergency of World War II. The intelligence agencies are generally responsible directly to the president, and because of their capabilities and because they have usually operated out of the spotlight, and often in secret, they have also contributed to the growth of executive power. Second, the direct and indirect impact of federal programs on the lives of individual citizens has increased tremendously since World War II. Third, in the 30 years since World War II, technology has made unparalleled advances. New technological innovations have markedly increased the agency's intelligence collection capabilities, a circumstance which has greatly enlarged the potential for abuses of personal liberties. To illustrate, the SALT negotiations and treaties have been possible because technological advances make it possible to accurately monitor arms limitations, but the very technology which permits such precise weapons monitoring also enables the user to intrude on the private conversations and activities of citizens. The targets of our intelligence efforts after World War II, the activities of hostile intelligence services, communists, and groups associated with them both at home and abroad were determined by successive administrations. In the 1960s, as the civil rights movement grew in the country, some intelligence agencies directed attention to civil rights organizations and groups hostile to them, such as the Ku Klux Klan. From the mid-1960s until the end of the Vietnam War, intelligence efforts were focused on anti-war groups. Just as the nature of intelligence activity has changed as a result of international and national developments, the public's attitude toward intelligence has also altered. During the last 8 years, beginning with Ramparts magazine's exposure of CIA-covered relationships with non-governmental organizations, there has been a series of allegations in the press and Congress which have provoked serious questions about the conduct of intelligence agencies at home and abroad. The water by the executive branch, misuse of intelligence agency. The Watergate disclosures raised additional questions concerning abuse of power by the executive branch, misuse of intelligence agencies, and the need. Third, in the 30.
I will read the rest of. So I'll start off from this sentence here. From the mid-1960s until the end of the Vietnam War, intelligence efforts were focused on anti-war groups. Just as the nature of intelligence activity has changed as a result of international and national developments, the public's attitude toward in- intelligence has also altered. During the last 8 years, beginning with the Ramparts magazine exposure of CIA covert relationships with non-governmental organizations, there has been a series of allegations in the press and Congress which have provoked serious questions about the conduct of intelligence agencies at home and abroad. The Watergate disclosures raised additional questions concerning abuse of power by the executive branch, misuse of intelligence agencies, and the need to strengthen legal restraints against such abuses. While the evidence in the committee's report emphasizes the misguided or improper activities of a few individuals in the executive branch, it is clear that the growth of the intelligence abuses reflects a more general failure of our basic institutions. Footnote 5. See the Select Committee's detailed report on, quote, intelligence and technology, end quote. End of page 18, beginning of page 19. Throughout its investigation, the committee has carefully inquired into the role of presidents and their advisors with respect to particular intelligence programs. On occasion, intelligence agencies conceal their programs from those in high authority. More frequently, it was the senior officials themselves who, through pressure for results, created the climate within which the abuses occurred. It is clear that greater executive control and accountability is necessary. The legislative branch has been remiss in exercising its control over the intelligence agencies. For 25 years, Congress has appropriated funds for intelligence activities. The closeted and fragmentary accounting which the intelligence community has given to a designated small group of legislators was accepted by Congress as adequate and in the best interest of national security. There were occasions when the executive intentionally withheld information relating to intelligence programs from the Congress, but there were also occasions when the principal role of the Congress was to call for more intelligence activities, including the activity which infringed the rights of citizens. In general, as with the executive, it is clear that Congress did not carry out effective oversight. The courts have also not confronted intelligence issues. As the Supreme Court noted in 1972 in commenting on warrantless electronic surveillance, the practice had been permitted by successive presidents for more than a quarter of a century without, quote, guidance from Congress or definitive decision of the courts, end quote. Of course, courts only consider the issues brought before them by litigants, and pervasive secrecy, coupled with tight judicially imposed rules of standing, have contributed to the absence of judicial decisions on intelligence issues. Nevertheless, the committee's investigation has uncovered a host of serious legal and constitutional issues relating to intelligence activity, and it's strong proof of the need for reform to note that scarcely any of those issues have been addressed in the courts. Throughout the period, the general public, while generally excluded from debate on intelligence issues, nevertheless supported the known and perceived activities of intelligence agencies. In the few years prior to the establishment of this committee, however, the public's awareness of the need to examine intelligence issues was heightened. The series of allegations and partial exposures in the press and the Congress provoked serious questions about the conduct of intelligence activities at home and abroad. The Watergate affair increased the public's concern about the abuse of governmental power and caused greater attention to be paid to the need to follow and to strengthen the role of law to check such abuses. Against this background, the committee considered its main task as making informed recommendations and judgments on the extent to which intelligence activities are necessary and how such necessary activities can be conducted within the framework of the Constitution. I will stop the reading here.